Good afternoon, everyone. We are so glad you could join us today. On behalf of Texas PACE Authority, I welcome you to our June T5 training webinar, Why ESG Matters for Property Owners and Managers. My name is Charlene Heidinger. I'm the president of the Texas PACE Authority, where we serve PACE regions in Texas, reaching about 73% of the population. I helped get the legislation passed and am proud of that and love working in a collaborative way with people throughout the state and throughout the country, really, in making this program successful, trusted, and available to everyone throughout the state. I have a background on Capitol Hill and public policy, and in communications policy, and love bringing that to the nonprofit world. It is my pleasure on behalf of Texas PACE Authority today to welcome you. I want to do just a couple housekeeping issues. First, let me apologize. Our panelists are not able to use their cameras. I don't know what our setting issue is, but through their voices and their enthusiasm, you're going to get a lot out of this next hour. You are muted with your video disabled. Please use the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. I will try and check chat, but it would be great if everybody can share their thoughts and ideas and questions in the same spot, which is for this webinar Q&A. The recording will be available on TPA's website and our YouTube channel, and our speakers will have access to it as well and able to share it as well. So let's get started. Today I am delighted to introduce Sylvia Golisano. She is a lead AP for O&M. She's got a background from BOMA International High Performance Standards for Sustainable Buildings. She's a Fitwel ambassador for ESG engineering, and she's a sustainability specialist. Sylvia joined Granite in 2007, where she oversees Granite's ESG strategy, sustainability initiatives, and high performance engineering operations. She has a fascinating upbringing in Europe, and she brings that and 20 years of experience. She's developed an extraordinary passion and unique approach for all things ESG, and that will certainly come out in her presentation. Sylvia serves as vice chair to the USGBC Texas Regional Council's Communications Committee. She's also a member of the City of Plano's Corporate Sustainability Forum, and she is a previous chair member of the BOMA Green Task Force. She's also a founding member of the Dallas 2030 District. In addition to all of those volunteer efforts, she volunteers at home and in many other ways in support of her family. Sylvia, we're delighted that you're here today. And I'd like to start off by asking you, Granite Properties has invested significantly in LEED and healthy buildings. Can you tell us why and how that fits into Granite's larger approach for environmental, social, and governance, or ESG, objectives?
And Charlene, thank you so much for having me and having asked me to participate on this panel. I'm very honored and look forward to some discussion, hopefully, that will be insightful and helpful to the audience. So at Granite, we have a holistic approach to ESG. We are very people-centric as an organization, but of course, we are also a real estate developer. We design, build, and operate and lease our physical commercial assets, which are located in 5 markets across the country. We are in Denver, Colorado, Atlanta, Georgia, Houston, Texas, Dallas, Texas, and Southern California. So we operate and manage just over 10 million square feet of real estate assets. And we have done some research over the last couple of years into sustainability certifications and wellness certifications, trying to create an overarching strategy around how we have third parties verify all the good things that we're doing in our buildings and with our communities. So really, LEED has emerged as still the market leader and predominant certification that is well recognized and respected. And so that was an easy decision for us to continue certify our buildings with the LEED certifications. Currently, we have about just under half of all of our assets are LEED certified, and we're going to continue that on into the future with new developments as well as existing buildings as applicable. On the wellness side, we did the same thing. We looked at all of the different certifications that are out there besides Fitwell, healthy buildings. There's so many others, but really Fitwell emerged, and we started looking at Fitwell well before the pandemic, really, and started following kind of its progress. And it was clear to us after doing our research that it was the best fit for Granite's culture and for what we are doing as a company. As I mentioned, we're very people-centric. We love working with our customers. Our promise and our purpose as a company is to inspire people to flourish in the places that we create. So our goal is to create environments, work environments, life environments where people want to be and where they can flourish. We're very much focused on wellness and safety and the health of our building occupants. And so Fitwell was just a natural fit. And plus a lot of the strategies, as I dove deeper into the actual certifications, I found that we were already doing a lot of the things that are considered well-documented strategies and helpful to building occupants. So so it kind of was a great fit for us to do LEED, focus on the asset, focus on the physical attributes of the building, but also look at the occupant, look at the people that live and work in and around our buildings, and taking care of them and making sure that they flourish. So go ahead, Charlene.
Oh, before we move on, I wanted to ask you, how has that approach and commitment played out as we come out of COVID and people start coming back to the office?
Yeah, so that's a great question. It really just heightened our awareness and our commitment to providing healthy and safe environments and helping our customers bring their employees back into the building. We wanted to make sure that we do everything we can as a landlord and as an operator manager of our buildings to help our customers. So we provided them with as much information as we could find and gather and implement in our buildings. So from touchless features, we already had those in some of our buildings, but we expanded and invested in touchless features in all of our buildings across all of our markets. So that's just going to be a standard going forward for us. The same with making sure that our air filtration systems function to the utmost efficiency, and we invested a lot into clean air technology to make sure that the indoor air quality is the best can be for our customers. And so that is what we have done, and it's really it has heightened our awareness of these things, but it just became a standard going forward for us.
That's wonderful. Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. We are going to move on today to our second speaker and get a Houston perspective. Josh Richards is the Corporate Director for ESG at Transwestern. He leads Transwestern's ESG efforts, supporting national operations for tenants, clients, and investors. He spearheads projects spanning energy, water and waste management, health and wellness, energy procurement, reporting and compliance, and national marketing and policy development. And I love this phrase, to embed ESG into the fabric of Transwestern's entire family of companies. Josh also heads up the Transwestern Experience, the firm's innovative approach to quality service and central tenet of its culture, providing leadership, training, and support at all levels of the organization. He's also been instrumental in launching and propelling Transwestern's diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts with a focus on building awareness. Josh brings nearly 14 years of experience to his work. That included working at First Potomac Realty Trust, a publicly traded REIT in the Washington, D.C. metropolitan region. His emphasis there achieved more than $1 million in reduced operating expense, and he saved 2.7 gigatons of CO2 and avoided emissions annually. It's a great experience to bring to Texas and share with all of us. He also brings years of experience in the private sector, in addition to that, and the public sector at EPA, the Department of Homeland Security, and the United Nations. Josh, too, is a local volunteer. He is partnering with the Greater Houston Partnership as a member of the One Houston Together Talent and Supplier Diversity Roundtables. He's working to promote racial and gender equality within the city. He served on similar boards in VA and DC, and we are glad that you are here with us, Josh. Josh is also a lead AP O&M through the USGBC, well AP with the International Buildings Institute, and he's an AEE CEM. So we've just about outdone my ability to keep up with all this alphabet soup, but it brings great expertise, and we're so glad to have you here today.
Well, I really appreciate that. That was a fantastic introduction, and I think that you're right there. That alone tells you how much goes into ESG, and I'm really excited to talk about some of that today.
So Josh, Transwestern has put a great deal of effort into resiliency and hardening your properties against severe weather and unexpected power outages. Can you tell us why and how that effort fits into Transwestern's larger commitment to ESG principles?
Absolutely. So I think resilience in particular is something that's often overlooked when we have the conversation about ESG, which is environmental social governance. Tends to trend more towards conversations about sustainability, which are your typical utility savings programs. Obviously, health and wellness has become such a huge piece of that, and we're getting so much more data and research behind it to understand those efforts. But when we talk about resilience, particularly on an asset-by-asset basis, there's a lot that goes into that. So traditional measures might be that hard infrastructure approach, where we're really looking at implementing new structures, reinforcing different elements, really focused on risk management to help address either changes in local climate, heat intensity, changes to precipitation, natural disasters. And at the same time, we want to understand other elements of it, things like cybersecurity. All of that really does go into our understanding of resilience. And for Transwestern, which we have the benefit of operating across the country, we obviously are headquartered here in Houston, but we operate in a number of different markets here in Texas and across the nation. We see a lot of different things that come into view. We have so many different specialties that are really required to understand local geographies, local regulatory policies. All of those things are incredibly important to us. And as anybody who works in real estate knows, that even a small mistake can be costly, not only from a financial perspective, especially if it's something that butts up against a regulatory element, but also it could be costly in terms of your brand and your reputation. It could be costly in terms of the human health and safety, whether it's of your workers or of your tenants. All those different things really do factor in. And for us, it's something we've been thinking about in separate pieces all over the company. What talking about it under the umbrella of resilience does is it brings the conversation together. It allows our engineers to talk with our accountants, to talk with our IT folks, and to understand the short and long-term impacts of everything we're doing. So I wanted to just maybe tell you a little bit about Transwestern. And as you can see on the slide here, we have obviously just a national presence. We have a lot of different elements across the country, over 316 million square feet in our managed portfolio, which includes a good chunk of industrial, a heavy focus on office, but also an expanding focus on healthcare, life sciences, retail, and things of that nature. That is just our asset services side. We have the benefit of having a number of different companies under our purview. So we have a development company, an investment company, and we also have some hospitality elements thrown in there. We're a fairly mid-sized company, certainly for commercial real estate, just over 2,100 people, about 33 locations, 33 markets, I should say, across the country. So we have a lot to really put our arms around. And when it comes to a story like ESG, there's a lot going on. If you don't mind flipping to the next slide here, Charlene, you can see a quick cover of our ESG report. Now, one of the exciting things for us as a company is we get to talk about all the great things we're doing. We get to set goals for ourselves. We get to challenge ourselves. And more importantly, we're staying honest and transparent for our investors, as well as for our tenants and our own team members. All of those things are incredibly critical. And as many folks know nowadays, keeping, recruiting, retaining top-end talent, that requires a little something extra. So by taking the values that we already held very closely, things around customer service, social and environmental health, all of transparency in our actions and accountability for what we're doing, especially on the financial side, wrapping that all into our umbrella of ESG has really allowed us to promote all the great work we're doing, as well as to challenge ourselves to be ahead of the curve. We want to be a differentiator in the marketplace. So it's incredibly important for us. Now, if you don't mind switching to the next slide, I just want to talk a little bit about that hard infrastructure. So when we talk about different natural disasters in particular, this is the first thing we're looking at when we talk about resilience. Obviously, some of these might be more familiar to you all, some of them may be less so, and these are going to apply depending on what geography you might be in. As you can see up in the top left corner, we have defensible areas. So anybody who's in a forest fire prone area is probably very well aware of this. So we're looking at a residential area where we have a removal of dense shrubbery. We're keeping trees away from the actual physical structure of the property itself. And the same thing applies to landscaping around office buildings, industrial complexes. We really want to make sure that we are not increasing the risk associated with wildfire spread at our properties. For those who might be in the coastal or maybe even out in New Orleans, that middle photo up at the top, you might be very familiar with. Those are hurricane shutters, things that help to prevent damage to your building and windows from objects flying in high wind. Now, these are all different types of adaptations that you might have depending on where you live. Not every property across the country is going to need them, but it might be something that is incredibly important and familiar as we're designing or modifying our buildings and trying to maintain things like business continuity. We're trying to ensure that the folks that are inside, that might happen to be inside during one of these events, they're safe. And maybe even most importantly, after the danger has cleared, we want to get folks back to work, get them back into the building, which right now, certainly coming out of the pandemic, is a huge piece of it. And I think Sylvia definitely touched on that when it comes to health and wellness. Preparing your buildings to be healthy, to be accessible, to be fully amenitized and engaging for not just the occupants, but the users, the guests, the vendors that come in and out of that space, the people that drive in and around the property. By making it safe and healthy for them, it's going to encourage folks to come back to the office. They're going to be a lot more likely to. Just some small things that I think are really important for folks here in the Texas markets. There on the bottom left, you can see some of those high metal walls. What we're looking at there are floodgates. So these are bits of infrastructure we can install around the perimeter of the building. They go up right before flooding or heavy rain hits, and it effectively prevents water from coming back up into the building itself. Obviously, the one caveat here is to be very, very thoughtful about the design. The last thing you want is water getting trapped behind it. So you want to make sure that you might have some associated pumping, some pumps and things like that related to it. You ought to make sure that these are maintained effectively so that all the sealant in between those different panels doesn't crack and you don't have leakage. All of that is really important, but as many of us, certainly in the Houston area, know after Harvey, the buildings that didn't have major flood damage were the first ones to get folks back. And it meant a huge difference in terms of releasing or maintaining tenants at those properties. Not to mention any kind of insurance claims you might have had. The last one I want to point out is just here on the bottom right. It may look like a very simple piece of infrastructure. It may, in fact, actually look like nothing at all. But what we see here are shaded walkways and places for folks to sit. One of the most, actually one of the highest incidences of hospitalization and even death in the United States, outside of things like heart disease, is actually related to heat. It's related to heat exhaustion, heat stroke, dehydration. And with so many of our buildings located in and around areas with lots of pavement or asphalt even, we have hardscape everywhere, which just reflects that heat right back up at the individual. So not only getting it from the sun, you're also getting it from below, which means it's very easy for folks to dehydrate. It's very easy for folks who might be wanting to engage with the natural environment, maybe get some rest and relaxation that way. It's an opportunity for us to encourage them to interact with those places. So now we've got physical infrastructure that is promoting health and wellness of the individuals, and that might actually encourage people to utilize those amenities more. Now we have a business case, right? Now we have reasons for folks to want to lease with us, to stay with us, because we're providing these types of amenities. Now, most of what I've been talking about, that's all hard infrastructure. That's stuff that we're pretty familiar with. Maybe not every property needs something quite like this, but I would say that a number of properties, certainly in the Texas area, we experience natural disasters with a relative amount of frequency. You know, the folks up in the Dallas-Fort Worth area might have high winds and tornado risk. Folks out west might have that forest fire risk. Down in the southeast, we might have flooding and hurricane risks. So there's a little something here for everyone. But what I want to add is that resilience isn't just about the physical structure. And as you can see on this next slide, a lot of it is also about that soft infrastructure. So how are we focusing on these different elements that are basically bolstering and creating resilience for our teams and the operations of the buildings themselves longer term? So we look at this first one. It's about diversity. Now, diversity is definitely one of those places where we see almost untold results, because diversity feels like an opportunity for us to better engage our tenants, to engage with our community, but there's also an opportunity for us to see gains in productivity. So we're actually seeing some stats out of the Network for Business Sustainability that by creating more similarity in the racial makeup between our upper management and our middle management or lower management folks, just by having those groups look and interact more closely, we're seeing on average $750 to $1,500 extra productivity per employee per year. Now, you're asking where those numbers come from. A lot of it has to do with buy-in and motivation associated with working. If you align your values with those of your employees and they feel more invested, they're more likely to engage at higher levels, more likely to provide their creative thoughts and ideas because they know they're going to be heard and valued. Those are things that are really important. And more important than that is if you have folks at your middle and upper management that look and come from the same types of backgrounds as folks lower in the company, then now you've got a role model. You've got people that look and act like these younger employees or these lower tier employees, and it invigorates them. They now have something to work for because they know it's achievable. It's a small change, but over long term, that can have a huge effect. Now, Transwestern in particular, it's something we've been working on for a long time, and we know it's not something that's going to change overnight. And to be completely frank, we're not trying to make it something that changes from night and day overnight. But what we are focused on is building a pipeline of high quality talent, and we are cultivating it. We're going out to our industry partners. We're going out to nonprofits. We're going to local colleges that we don't typically recruit from. And we're just asking them to help us identify individuals that would be great to have on our team. We still go through a traditional interview process. It still is an opportunity for them to meet our executives and for them to be vetted so they have the right personality and culture and values that really support what we do. But we've over the last 3 or 4 years, we've built an incredible pipeline. And if you come back to Transwestern in 10 years, I think you're going to be impressed with how much we really have changed, we've grown, and more importantly, we're looking like our clients now, right? We're, as opposed to just being a more family-owned, family-oriented company, we're expanding, we're understanding how things have to change and grow, and we're excited about that. The last thing I really want to talk about, amenities, that access to the outside views, open lobbies, all these different elements are absolutely critical to the resilience of a property. If you want your property to be attractive long-term, that's one of the reasons why green building certifications mean so much. You're demonstrating the long-term viability and operational success of these properties. One thing to really pay attention to is just indoor air quality. Something as simple as increasing outside air circulation can have up to 20% increase in productivity, which, relatively speaking, that's about a day less in sick leave per person per year. Just think what you could do if everybody in your company worked a full day more on these types of things. So I think that there's a lot to be said about that. And I would love to be able to kind of talk more about that. I think Sylvia would also be great to ask about that. She's definitely the expert on that one, so I will defer to her. Last couple of things I just want to touch on is that resilience and the long-term viability of any business opportunity. It doesn't just depend on the people running the ship. It also depends on everybody who's around it. So it's your community, it's your tenants. How do we make sure they're valued, that they continue to come back? And I think you can kind of see on this next slide that I have for you all, that branding in particular, it's huge. One of the reasons why we see so many Fortune 500 companies doubling down on sustainability, energy efficiency, ESG more broadly, it's because not only are their customers asking for it, their customers are now preferring companies that do the work and talk about the work. So I cannot understate how important it is that this is no longer just something nice to have for many of us. It's something we have to have. And we can either push back and hope that we don't get asked, or like so many companies in the real estate market, we are trying to get out ahead of it. We want to attract investors, and we know this is what they're asking for. To be completely honest, I've been in this business for quite a while, and of course it's a headache. And most people will probably say that their job is a headache. This is no different. But there's so much value that can be added here. Not only are you demonstrating your success, are you showing offsets for carbon, are you creating policies that are actually healthier for your tenants and your employees, but you're also able to tell this great story that tends to be a lot more people-centric, right? How many of us want to buy a product from a company when we don't have a nice mascot, right? Look at car insurance. Once the Gecko came out, people went nuts for it. Before that, insurance just felt very generic. Now we have the Gecko, now we have Flo, now we have Jake from State Farm, and we can identify with these brands so much more effectively. We want that same type of brand recognition coming from us, and ESG is a great place for us to really differentiate ourselves. Transwestern's had a lot of fun doing it. We've got a long way to go, but we are excited to partner with all of our folks, partner with some of our local organizations, really driving toward those elements. And we're excited to see how resilient Transwestern is going to be in the next 10 and 15 years.
Well, Josh, ditto to everything Josh just laid out for you, and I wholeheartedly agree with everything. And I'm so impressed with all of your efforts and everything that Transwestern has been working on. It's truly a pleasure to see. And the only thing I would add, not much because you've said it all, Josh, but it's really ESG may be a new buzzword. Some companies, many companies may not be aware of what it is or what it is all about. And that's why it is a buzzword and it's being talked about so much right now. But really what it is if you think about the three categories, environmental, social, and governance, ESG touches every single aspect of our building, and not only our buildings, but our building occupants as well. And so when I talk to our people at Granite, I've had some great conversations. I get to now speak to every single leader within our company and talk to them about ESG and how in every single department, how ESG is affecting them, how important it is to just do our business and do our business well and do the right thing by our employees, do the right thing by our customers, our partners, and the communities that we work and volunteer in and live in. And it is not that it's, you know, it's a fad and it's going to go away. It's here to stay. It may reinvent itself again, going from, okay, first we were all talking about a green building, then we were talking about corporate social responsibility, and then it became sustainability, and now it's ESG, and it will reinvent itself as we kind of hone in and kind of redefine what it means to do a business and that profits not only the company, but that benefits the people that are working in our buildings and the communities that surround us. And there's some great questions. I would love to bring in some of our audience. Charlene, did you want to look at those maybe? You're on mute. Can you unmute yourself, Charlene? Let me see if I can unmute her. I'm unable to. Charlene, your microphone. We can't hear you.
Okay, thank you.
Hi.
Oh, I'm not going to win any prizes on technology. I have no shortage of reasons to be humble. Let's take a question from Sean Auckland from Spear. Sean asks if you can please share the information on the benefits of diversity.
Absolutely.
Go ahead.
Sean, I would say that there are a lot of different places we can get it. Greater, if you're happening to be in the Houston area, the Greater Houston Partnership has a pretty extensive program. They're working on everything from understanding race, in particular, race and gender, I should say, around recruitment, as well as something that I'm getting my feet wet in, which is around supplier diversity. So understanding whom we do business with, when we're actually soliciting for contracts, things of that nature. They've got some good programs, including some opportunities for pilot programs available through there. I can also, I will send to Charlene after this a couple links that I've used in the past that help to illustrate some of the basics, we'll say, of DEI. I do think that it's important to note every company is going to be a little bit different. Every setting and culture is going to be reinforced a little bit differently. And it's important to kind of make sure that you take that into consideration. I think most of these pieces of data are great, but they are very broad strokes, you know, Fortune 500 company level primarily. So just kind of keep that in mind. We definitely had to do some modifying when we made it to our initial surveys, just to make sure that we weren't comparing ourselves against folks that are 3 to 4 times our size and whatnot.
That's great. Everybody on the call will get a follow-up video with a link, a follow-up email with a link to the video and the PowerPoint, and we'll be delighted to add any other additional information that our speakers want to share. That's terrific. I want to take just a minute to talk to you about PACE, because one of the biggest questions that people have when it comes to all of these wonderful commitments that we want to make to our tenants and our communities is, how are we going to pay for it? Right? We have all these great opportunities now and focus on ESG, and in fact, tenants and investors that are asking for it. It will certainly lower operating costs and make our buildings healthier, but even modest upgrades can be expensive. And it's very hard to justify the upfront costs to property we already own, given all the other expenses that are competing for bottom lines, especially today. Failing equipment costs hurt our system, our costs. We lose system optimization, and everything ends up being costing more, lowering a building performance, challenging our competitiveness, comfort, productivity, and exposes the property and the people in the property to increased risk, environmental risk and storm risks. Property assessed clean energy is a Texas law that enables these commercial, industrial, and multifamily property owners to access long-term financing for everything that makes the property more energy efficient, water efficient, or to create power on site. Many of these measures also increase resiliency. And so PACE is a way to pay for much of what is embraced within the concepts of ESG. And so I just wanted to take a minute to share with you where this financing program is available, where it has been created by cities and counties in Texas. Texas Pace Authority is a nonprofit administering these programs as a public service, very much with ESG concepts in our DNA. We serve 73% of the population to date and look forward to growing this program and making it available to all of Texas. To date, I think a lot of Texas developers and property owners would be surprised to learn that we've facilitated $223 million in PACE investment. It continues to grow. As you can see geometrically, we're already off to a great start with this year. Lots of very transformative projects in the pipeline. And we've touched on all different kinds of property, types of properties, as you can see as well. So PACE is a win-win-win. We realize that nobody's going to use the financing to promote energy and water saving measures in property until the commitment is made to do those measures. So let's get back to the Q&A and our wonderful speakers and address some of these really interesting questions to get to the why we should do this. And then I hope you'll remember when those conversations take form that Texas has a way to help you make it possible through a financing mechanism called PACE. So Jonathan Kratz with USGBC asks for Josh and Sylvia to discuss how have ESG initiatives been incorporated into tenant and potential tenant outreach?
I can take that one. First, I wanted to answer the chat question from earlier, just adjust it just for a minute, about sharing information on the benefits of diversity. For myself and for Granite, that I represent, more than anything, the biggest benefit to having a diverse workforce, a diverse company, is diversity of thought. If someone that grows up in Europe, for example, like myself, thinks about things and how things should be and should work and may work, or a new idea, I might think about it differently than someone who has grown up in Texas all their life, for example. And so that diversity of thought is super important to us to be able to innovate, to be creative, and to come up with new ways to solve challenges that we face in our industry. And then thank you, Jonathan, for your thoughtful questions. How have ESG initiatives been incorporated into potential tenant outreach? That is a great question, actually. And as I mentioned earlier, I have the opportunity now in my role to really speak with every single leader in our company, every single department, and to talk to them about what challenges they face and how we can tell our story really to our customers, to our partners, and be able to educate them on what it means to us to do our business well, to be great at what we do, and how to share that with our customers and with our partners. So I would say definitely educating them. I'm wanting to be their resource, go-to person for them to find out information, to share with their stakeholders, with tenants and with potential tenants. Josh?
Yeah, I'd love to basically echo a lot of what you said, Sylvia. I will say that ESG, for many of those who've been in and around sustainability for a long time, that there's a kind of a battle between the push of information and the pull of information. Obviously, we love it when our tenants and potential tenants come to us asking these questions already, but a lot of it really does depend upon researching those groups, making sure we understand what their values are, and making sure that information is readily accessible if and when they do decide to approach us. We certainly don't want it to be something where we're kind of cramming down their throats, for lack of a better term. We want it to be an open conversation and to make sure that we stay flexible in the kinds of solutions we can provide. So if for existing tenants, obviously, I think a lot of what we do has started back in the day, decades ago with Earth Day. That was a great way to just get the conversation out there. Now we're engaging them in conversations about any kind of replacements for lighting. Are there opportunities for cost sharing? Are we doing anything around composting? And in small ways, over time, we're building up this dialogue with our tenants. When it comes to potential tenants in particular, we love the opportunity to lead with and engage in conversations around green leasing. We want to be able to include many of these different things that for us are standard operation, but may not seem standard operation for certain types of properties, certain tenants, certain clients that we might be working directly with and for. So we want to make sure that the conversation's out there about opportunities for cost sharing. Data sharing is a big piece. We want to be able to fully benchmark our properties for energy, water, and waste. We also want to make sure that if they have special requirements, if they have concerns about the health and wellness or accessibility within the space, that we are engaging them on those conversations as they're doing the building walkthroughs, if not earlier. In all of our pitch books, we now include ESG, which includes our company culture, our diversity, our sustainability efforts, as well as a good piece of our governance. That's all in there. That's something that we lead with. We now have ESG listed directly on our website for folks that are interested. We make diversity, equity, and inclusion a big part of our social media outreach. Transwestern has a pretty strong social media campaign on Instagram, for instance, where we highlight different members of our company, give them an opportunity to share a quote and what makes them excited to come to work. It's small, but it does have a measurable effect. Helps people put a face to the company that we are, and it also creates a little bit of levity to things. I think real estate is a very serious business, so any opportunity we have to have a personal conversation with people is great. I think that's something that we've seen a lot of, and we're hoping green leasing in particular is going to become a bigger and bigger piece of what we're able to accomplish in the future.
What tools do you use to track your ESG goals? That might be software or other internal means.
Yeah, for us, Granite has been an early adopter of Energy Star Portfolio Manager. We have been benchmarking our buildings all along, and we are still working on some components of ESG. So we're great at tracking our energy, and we're good at tracking water. Not so great so far to track our waste. And that is one thing that is on my list to work on, to start tracking that and benchmarking it as well. But a lot of our information, we're going to be probably engaging a software platform in the near future to be able to track and manage a lot of this data that we're amassing now and have for quite some time. And that's part of our kind of ESG journey. We're really still in the infancy stages of it. So that's part of it.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more. I think that we're in a very similar place. We've been pretty solid around energy and water tracking. We use a combination of things like Energy Star's Portfolio Manager, as well as working with a number of companies over the last several years, from Mach Energy to Measurable to Carbon Lighthouse, Gobi, those different groups. Often because of the way that Transwestern is structured, we work with our clients and many of their preferred vendors. Sometimes we're able to go directly through the accounting platforms. They have those kinds of modules. But again, we like to feed all that information into Energy Star. It's free. It's relatively simple for us to train on and to get our teams kind of onboarded for that type of thing. It's easy for us to share data. The reports in there are relatively basic and straightforward, but that's what we need at this point. What we are trying to do is get a better handle on the ins and outs of things around our investment and development side of things. On project by project basis, we're really good at collecting that information. If we were asked today to go and aggregate the information from all of our projects for the last 10 years, we'd have a much more difficult time doing that, because much of that was done through analog, through paper trails, through different spreadsheets, and sometimes directly with the clients themselves. So one of our big pushes is just to make sure that the information that's already out there is now being centralized. We're starting small, we're starting internal to make sure our processes are aligned. But we are speaking with companies from PwC to some of our familiar local consultants who are helping us do things like materiality assessments to understand what's really in scope for us. We have a pretty good idea of what is important to us and to our consumers, our customers. But at the end of the day, is there something we're missing? Is there, an opportunity for risk that we're not paying attention to because we're not as well versed in those elements as they are? Are there regulations coming down the pike that we might not have heard of in certain markets? So all those things are being taken into consideration. And I think that's really our next step, is that materiality assessment.
Do you have recommendations for the participants today on how they can start exploring ESG and finding the right mix for their properties? I understand that the concepts are customizable. So how does a commercial property owner identify the right ESG targets for their property?
So for us at Granite, we are kind of in the process of doing that right now, actually, kind of figuring out who are our stakeholders. Number one, we identified those, and what is important to them. And so we're in the process of doing kind of an internal inquiry. We developed some surveys to be sent to our customers, actually out right now, to our customers, to tenant brokers, and to the architects we work with on our new developments, and just ask them, how do they think about ESG? What topics within ESG are important to them, and then looking ourselves in the mirror as Granite and saying what are the topics that are important to us and to our employees and to our partners, and seeing where the overlap is, and then honing in on those topics, and starting to formulate a kind of a formal strategy around ESG.
Yeah, I would say that we're finding ourselves in different places for our different companies. I think that understanding where to start really comes from what kind of information are available. So the one thing I would definitely recommend is you don't have to build Rome in a day, right? We're not going to tackle all of the possible challenges and opportunities in the same year. We actually started a couple of years ago. We put together a 5-year strategic plan. So we're actually in year 4 of that plan. And it's really forced us, kind of spurred us to make the commitment and to over time build out those resources. So the hope is that by the end of next year, we'll have a really good policy framework and data collection framework for all of our companies. So it's easier for us to report more seamlessly and much more quickly. The one thing I would really recommend is to, before we figure out where we need to be, think about what we already have. There's a lot of information at our fingertips. Many times it's just important to repurpose it. A lot of that risk data that we're dealing with, whether it's insurance related or business continuity planning or training, all of that really does fall under the ESG platform. If we're looking at utilities, are we tracking that in any place that's central? Is that something that we can onboard fairly quickly? Are there certain property types we need to start with? There are different small pieces that we can bite off and over time build it out into a fully encompassed program. I will also suggest that depending on the size and scale of the work that you do, it could take 3 to 5 years. And that's completely fine, because you can have victories every single year along the way. But building to that crescendo is really important, that over time you're going to get a better handle on the information. You'll get a better understanding of what vendors are out there to support you, what the needs of your platform are. The one thing I will say is, as you do that, really focus on the story, right? This is about not just selling it to your tenants and your customers and clients. It's about selling it to your own team members. Make them understand why this is important, help them identify why that business case really does exist, and that this isn't just an opportunity to feel a little bit better about ourselves. We're actually making a financial benefit for our company and that of our customers, along with all the ancillary benefits of improving climate mitigation, adapting and being more resilient for our properties, and hopefully over time making a more enjoyable, welcoming community through diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts.
Changing behavior is the hardest part of sustainability, resiliency, and equity. What programs have you implemented to meet these goals?
That's a good question. Behavior is definitely, I think you just do it incrementally. Like Josh says, you don't have to build Rome in a day. you educate, and then you reinforce with positive reinforcement, and that's how you change behavior.
I'd also suggest that something that you mentioned, Sylvia, is a great place to start. The best way to know if you're changing behavior is to ask people how they feel. Doing a survey internal to your own company is a great way to understand where people are, what kind of specific interventions are necessary to make those changes. And it's a lot easier to be more specific and targeted with those things. We did something very similar when we started our diversity, equity, inclusion efforts at the national level. And we were pleasantly surprised that our company and our team members already felt great about a lot of things we were nervous about. At the same time, we noticed that there were a couple areas where we were much further behind than we had expected. So it gave us opportunity to really target those resources. It's also really important for us to make sure we have specific points of accountability. We don't want to just put a program out and hope people feel better. We want people following up with that program. We want people tracking and defining metrics for that program. So we know, is this working? Is this getting us where we want to be? And does it justify any kind of time or expense we're putting into it? Again, if we think about everything as a business case, it's a lot easier to get through the process. It's a lot easier for us to bring people along too, because showing that we're increasing productivity, increasing outputs, increasing retention rates, all those things save our company money in the long term. And that's great. Who wouldn't want to be part of a company that's constantly saving more money?
I agree with that. And for us too, I think starting out internally, we don't want to go out to our customers and tell them, oh, you got to start doing this now, because we want to feel good about ourselves. We want to be the company. We want to be the role model for our customers and for our employees as well. A great exercise for us over the years has been participating in the Great Place to Work survey, and really listening to our employees and responding and acknowledging if there is stress, or if there's fear, or if there is fear of change. Really listening to our employees. We have been able to be recognized as a great place to work for 9 years in a row, and we're super proud of that. So I think looking at, as Josh mentioned, your internal processes, you probably already are doing a lot of the things that fall into ESG and don't even realize it. So just looking at your processes and how they relate to the environmental, how they relate to the social and governance, you probably already have a lot of the pieces in place.
This next question might be hard, because it reminds me of when someone asks a parent, which is your favorite child? I can't answer that. What is your favorite initiative among those you have tried?
So for me right now, I'm in the middle of certifying 10 projects with Fitwel, and that's been super fun for me. I did our pilot project at one of our Southern California locations in 2020 during the pandemic, and that was a great experience. And so now I get to scale it across all of our markets. It's been super fun working with our local teams, and so yeah, that's been so far my favorite initiative.
Great.
Yeah, I will say that for me, there's a lot of technical work that goes into what we do here around ESG, but for me, the reason why I love working in this area is because of how much I get to interact directly with people. And honestly, it becomes customer service at the end of the day. I want them to leave happier, having had a conversation with me, having a better understanding of what ESG means and what it means for them. And honestly, it comes back to company culture. When I think of all of our team members as internal customers. And because of that, I get the opportunity to travel, teach for our markets. I'm actually going to be in the DC area doing just this coming next week, where I get to sit down and I get to talk about not just ESG, not just diversity, equity, inclusion, but also all these different elements, from training to health and wellness, to team member engagement, to confidence building, public speaking. I'll be honest, I love teaching improv, because I think it's such a useful skill when it comes to business. How many of us have been on a call, especially a Zoom call, and we get asked something and there's dead silence and we're not sure what to do with it. It just hangs there. right? A little bit of fun improv skills actually helps keep the conversation going. It's great for meeting execution, and you would be blown away at how much more efficient meetings are once people have a little bit of improv under their belts, because people are not waiting for other people to create the conversation. They can spur the conversation. They can figure out whom to lean on for technical specialties. And if you want to talk about productivity, that's a great one. Meetings go from an hour to a half an hour. People can get back to doing what they need to do or take their water breaks before the next meetings, all that kind of stuff. And for me, I get to leave people with a smile on their face. I get to meet people face to face and have personal connections. So that's a huge piece. And I'm sure both Charlene and Sylvia will agree with me on this, is that if you can make that personal connection with somebody, especially on a topic like ESG, it is so much easier to bring people along once they like you. If they like you, they're going to like what you have to say. So being the social butterflies that we are, I think it's certainly helped us get where we are.
I love that. And Josh, I may have to recruit you to teach some improv to our team.
I appreciate that.
Sounds like a plan. Only with that webinar, we're going to have to make sure the cameras work.
There we go.
Okay, last question. We have just a couple minutes left. Can you each tell us, make the business case for investing in ESG, if you would?
The business case for us is really very, very simple. It's just the way to do good business. When you take good care of your employees and they are healthy and happy, they will do a better job of taking care of our customers. When our customers are healthy and happy, they are more productive and make more money and treat their employees better. And the circle goes round and round and everybody wins. So for us, the business case is very, very simple. It just makes sense.
Yeah, I think that really is pretty much the same thing I would say. It's at the end of the day, it really comes down to this return on investment. It's a very simple way to approach this. If we're talking about wanting to maximize profit, well, we do that by keeping our overhead low, which means that we have lower turnover of our own internal employees. It means that we have health and wellness, so folks don't stay at home sick, they're at the office. It means that we have an investment in the healthy buildings, the operation of healthy buildings, because it keeps operating costs low. It keeps tenant occupancy rates high. It encourages higher rents per square foot. We already can associate the premiums associated with green certifications and properties, especially new development properties. We're also seeing a differentiation in branding. We're much more likely to attract people when we have this positive story. All these different things are by themselves great reasons to do it, but you put them all together and you put in some social welfare, social wellness along with all these different elements and governance and transparency. That just makes you a better functioning company. It reduces your risk and it increases your long-term viability to return profit that matches the market or beats it every time.
All right, we've come to the end of our hour. This has been one of the most enjoyable conversations I've had the pleasure of listening to, and I want to thank Josh Richards from Transwestern and Sylvia Golisano from Granite Properties for very generously sharing their expertise and the why behind what they do and why they love doing it. So thank you both, and thank you participants for spending this hour with us.
And thank you for the great questions.
Absolute pleasure to be here. Thank you all so much.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye now.